You're watching Access Minnesota. Here's Jim Dubois.
Jeannine Cavender-Bares is an associate professor in the College of Biological Sciences at the University of Minnesota. Professor Cavender-Bares, welcome to Access Minnesota.
Thank you.
In your recent study for the journal Ecology, you found that cities contain a greater diversity of plant species than rural environments. This is not, though, necessarily a good thing. What are the downsides that this diversity causes?
What we actually found is that while you get more species in urban environments, we get less diversity of other kinds. So we can think of diversity in a number of ways. One way is to just count the number of species, but another way is to think about the different kinds of strategies for survival. So some plants might have deep roots or shallow roots. Some plants might do well in the shade, some in the sun. But what we find in urban environments is even though there are more numbers or higher numbers of species, they all seem to follow similar strategies. So there's lower diversity in terms of the strategies. There's also fewer branches, if you will, in the plant kingdom, in the plant tree of life. And so drawing on the available strategies that have evolved for surviving, urban environments have selected for a very limited set of strategies.
What can we do to protect native plants and the rural environment?
Minnesota has a rich history of trying to protect the natural environment, and we have quite a number of parks where species are conserved and managed. So I would say these efforts are quite strong in Minnesota, and to the extent that people become aware of those valuable resources, take advantage of them, support them, we'll be able to continue to maintain our natural areas in Minnesota.
In your research, what impact did human activities have on the variety of species that you saw in urban areas? Obviously, we've seen the decline of the prairie, the growth of agriculture, people moving to urban areas, starting their own gardens, cultivating their lawns, putting fertilizer on their lawns. Are these human activities all detrimental to the natural plants that we would have seen in this state 150, 200 years ago?
Well, you remind me of a book I've been reading called 1493 by Charles Mann, which he documents what has been called the Columbian Exchange, that started when Columbus first came to the Americas, and trade was initiated around the world. And one of the things that went along with that was the spread of biological organisms, plants and animals, bacteria and so forth, that spread around the globe and have been part of this process that's been called the Homogecene. And we may be actually homogenizing the biota around the planet through human activities. Worm invasions have been well documented in the Americas, coming from Europe. These have huge impact here in Minnesota. All the foods we eat, these have been domesticated in various continents around the globe and are everywhere. Tomatoes from the Americans are used in Italy, and citrus from Africa is around the globe, and so forth. So we're really extending and accelerating this process through globalization now, and with the movement of organisms around the globe, creating the situation where you can find those species that do well in human environments everywhere on the planet.
Do we need to change our own attitudes? For example, when I look at a lot of prairie plants, they're not particularly attractive plants, but the plants we might want to grow ourselves, we might like them because they're colorful, they have a nice aroma, but are we a little bit prejudiced against those native plants?
We might be, because they haven't been domesticated, so they haven't been bred to meet our desires. So very likely we are biased against the plants that we haven't actively altered for our own aesthetic. But we may care about things those species provide. Increasing numbers of studies here at Minnesota and around the world have shown that as you increase the kinds of strategies that plants use to persist, pollinate, access resources, you increase the ecosystem services they provide. They sequester more carbon, they can filter water more efficiently, they can prevent runoff, and provide shade, provide food and shelter for other species that we might want to have around. So we can be mindful of these kinds of ecosystem services that we care about and think about that when we consider our biases.
Jeannine Cavender-Bares, Associate Professor in the College of Biological Sciences at the University of Minnesota. Thanks so much for joining us on Access Minnesota.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's been 1 year since Eric Kaler was named University of Minnesota president. He's already faced a number of challenges, including the hiring of a new athletics director. Next month on Access Minnesota, we'll talk with President Kaler about his first year on the job. That's all for this edition of Access Minnesota. We'll see you next month. Thanks for watching.
Access Minnesota. Issues that matter to you. Join us again next week as we bring you the newsmakers and stories that shape our everyday lives. Access Minnesota is produced by the Minnesota Broadcasters Association in cooperation with the University of Minnesota's College of Liberal Arts.